Thank you for watching this series aiming at preparing for the paradigm shift and mindset transitioning, redefining the philosophical meaning of society, and establishing natural law as a model to overcome the prevailing world dystopia. The love for humanity does not require to hug everybody while continually screaming the word peace out of our lungs, but a comprehension and assimilation of a long list of social PTSDs, marking the beginning of a long journey on the path towards self-healing. In short, saving and loving humanity starts with the resolution of inner conflicts.
Keeping them honest tonight, a year-long investigation by the Tampa Bay Times, the Center for Investigative Reporting, and previous reporting here on AC360 shows that a small but aggressive segment of the charity world seems to care little about actually helping others. Instead, it generates six-figure salaries for some of the people who run the charities and feeds a multi-billion-dollar professional solicitation industry that only cares about profit. And what we've also found out is that no matter how blatant the scam or how obvious the proof is that donations are being squandered, no one seems to be going after them.
This is an historic moment.
A federal investigation has found $187 million raised in donations to 4 separate cancer charities has largely gone not to cancer survivors, not to cancer research, but somewhere else entirely. Scammers and fundraisers.
The consensus is that war is a fatality of life, that nature condemns man to remain an animal and fall prey to immorality because she made him cruel, gullible, and greedy. The problem, you see, with such a consensus is that it breeds a mindset disrespecting life as a whole and thus itself immoral. The paramount of this immorality is without a doubt the business of military intervention and silently watching and supporting them. That immorality, again, springs from the ignorance of cause and effect, a natural law setting into motion a dual dynamics that will eventually turn against those who did nothing or decided to ignore the issues.
I love the idea of foreign aid, don't you? You see, I see it as an opportunity to practice the virtues of compassion and generosity to help others, especially in times of war and conflict. Aid workers do some great work. They build schools, they provide access to clean water, healthcare. They deliver emergency food aid to people who are suffering. But good intentions aside, on a much, much larger scale, foreign aid has not improved the lives and living conditions of the world's most poorest and vulnerable people. It just hasn't. And this is despite an international aid apparatus that has been set up with thousands of organizations and institutions that distribute billions of dollars of aid to every corner of the world over the past 50 years.
Positively, altruism will have long-lasting effects when, 1, nothing is asked in return, cannot be traded either, otherwise it is a form of monetization and can be used as a blackmail. Since you cannot help me, I will not help you either, so to speak. 2, when people in the need ask for help only, otherwise others will take advantage of it eventually. 3, when it is not monetized, otherwise it will spread corruption like wildfire, cannot generate profit for all parties involved. 4, when people volunteer exclusively, no salary for helping others. 5, not enforced, nobody can dictate the parameters of altruism, one cannot force people to be generous. 6, when acting locally, that's the only way for good actions to ripple through. And now let's go over the negative side effects of monetized altruism. First, socialism, the most obvious. People would do whatever they can to access social programs such as food stamps or even government grants and subsidies. Second biggest charity CEO earning high six figures, some of which almost $1 million yearly. 3. Humanitarian aid as corrupt most recipient countries, does not work, and these developing countries go through military and political upheavals. As a result, our charitable UN unsuccessfully attempts to impose peace by arms. 4. Sustaining the divide and conquer. The right spent on war to save democracy and the left spent on welfare. As a result, both put us on the edge of financial ruin. 5. Not to mention the so-called foundations that funnel our donations between themselves. Will finance only those supporting their platforms, so more can be donated back to the same foundation. 6. Financing war under the guise to protect populations, and the economy has always been an easy sell. 7. Monetized altruism is not preventive, cannot be preventive, otherwise it would put itself out of business. And when you have a second, please make a quick search on Vatican's wealth. Bankers' best guesses put it at 15 billion, but it is impossible to pin down. Shouldn't Vatican get rid of its wealth? First, since it claims to represent the Church of God and the virtues of altruism.
You see, the gap between the world's richest and poorest countries is tremendous, and it's increasing. In my own work, researching war-affected states, I can tell you that aid has not achieved desirable results in places like Angola, Rwanda, Sierra Leone, Somalia, Kosovo, Afghanistan, Iraq. And what's worse is that the international aid community keeps making the same mistakes over and over and over again, and they keep getting away with it.
Reality is a mirror, as everything affects anything. Holographic reality being a natural law, nobody should ever feel safe when allowing the perpetuation of destruction enforced upon others. As long as humans tolerate the act of war, don't request the dismantlement of standing armies, it will remain impossible to thrive and begin to reinvent the meaning of societies.
For more on this, we turn to Ali Al-Ahmed. He's the director of Gulf Affairs Institute. Ali, thank you for your time tonight. This is a very crucial time in this conflict in Yemen. Give us an idea of what is it like on the ground there? Famine, cholera, is that accurate? Is this really a horrible situation?
It is a horrible situation where so-called the international community is partaking in besieging and starving an entire population. Yemen is under complete siege by the Saudi-led coalition supported by the United States and the United Kingdom military, and this has been going on for nearly 3 years, resulting in the largest cholera outbreak of all time and of the largest famine at this time
How
around
bad
the world.
is it in Yemen? 17 million people live on the edge of starvation. Some, like Ali, have already died. What are people saying about it? They say that the humanitarian crisis in Yemen may be worse than Syria. Let me repeat that, because nobody in America is listening to this. Everybody's paying attention to some silly show trials and silly stuff going on in committees. Nobody's talking about this at all. They say it is worse than Syria. Millions of people have fled Syria. Hundreds of thousands have died, and people are now predicting Yemen may be worse. One refugee group said this, that the impending famine in Yemen may reach biblical proportions.
It's oil and money. Even if it is not Britain, If it was any other country, I don't think we would hear any outcry, as long as the bombings are done by Saudi Arabia.
This is also not just a humanitarian crisis, it's also a protection crisis. And we've seen grave violations of international humanitarian law. We've seen basic human rights being ignored or prevented. We've seen gender-based violence on the increase, as well as the recruitment of child soldiers. So all of this gives you the impression that there's a very fragile rights agenda.
We're asking for 2.96 billion, which is an increase from last year, and it's because the situation has just become all the more desperate and all the more negative.
But what if it's not? What if giving aid to the world's poorest communities are just stories we tell each other to feel good about ourselves as a nation, but that the infrastructure of third world aid is set up in such a way that we, living in the richest part of the world, have been benefiting from it all along? I can pull out the facts that indicate that for every dollar of aid rich countries give to poor countries, they receive between $7 to $10 back through debt repayment, profits, trade, etc. And if you add that up each year, according to the UN Conference on Trade and Development, there is a net transfer of wealth that moves from the poorest countries of the world to the richest countries in the amount of $200 billion a year.
Monetized altruism is shattering the fabric of society. It does not matter whether the system is socialism or capitalism. Both complete one another and lead to the same aftermath inherent to following the money. Corporate welfare does exist and is destructive as well, as it eliminates medium and small-sized businesses steadily but surely. And if today we can gradually witness the disappearance of the middle class in the West, we shouldn't be looking any further. The answer lies right in front of our very eyes. As Michael Tellinger puts it, no matter how we look at the picture, it is the mere presence of money which is the problem.
50% of the world population, so at this point that's 3.5 billion people, they have less than the top 80 people, or some crazy low number like that, 86 or something like that. So enough people that could fit on one of those double-decker buses, they have more wealth than half the world combined.
Anybody considering the above seriously will have to realize the dangerous path we have embarked on. Yes, the red pill might be hard to swallow, but there is no other way to put an end to this programming, inducing the illusion of security. Monetized altruism is lethal, and there is no other way to benefit from its positive aspects as long as everybody follows the money. That is precisely why the Earth Custodians movement will only focus on online advertising and a minimalist channel on all media possible to spread the word. The Earth Custodians movement merely strikes at the core. There is nothing to lose, really. Free will comes with personal responsibility. And there is no personal responsibility without staring at the precipice and taking action. And yes, free will does exist, but within the law. We all have the free will to notice or not that nature, immutable law, just works the same way for everybody.